panel for educational policy, and I'd like to know from each of you, what kind of a person would you be looking for, and what would be their marching orders on some of the key issues like co-location of charters, teacher evaluations, and the like. Let's start with you, Peter Vallone.
Well, I'm a parent of two girls who went to public schools here in Queens, and my main criteria is going to be a parent, because I know what it's like to be ignored. For the last 8 years my kids were in school. As a parent, I also know what it's like to be ignored as a member of the Education Committee, a former member at the New York City Council. So as a parent, I've been to the parent-teacher meetings. I've stood outside the school. I've had the conversation. I know, as only a parent could know, what's wrong with our schools and what's right with our schools. And when I appoint somebody, they're going to be a parent, and they're going to know that they are not going to be ignored. The parents are going to have a voice. That's going to be the main marching orders, whoever I put on there. You listen to the parents, and then you represent the parents, because they have not had a voice on that panel.
Very good. Tony Vallone.
Well, hopefully under a new mayor, we're going to get rid of this panel, because it really hasn't worked. It's not representative of the parents or the students. I want to appoint somebody who is like an educator, somebody who understands education, who's willing to change mayoral control and teaching to the test, and really give the morale back to teachers and give them the opportunity to really teach. And we're not doing that right now. And we also have to have somebody on that, whatever mechanism we have, that really gives the students the ability that they need to have the best education, create more classrooms, more teachers, make sure that every classroom every student has a computer, and every classroom has a smart board. I've introduced legislation in Albany to end the co-locations and the closing of schools, to create a moratorium on that. Because it's almost like shifting the chairs on the Titanic. We're just closing a school, opening it under a different name, but we're creating the problems in the schools because we're taking away the resources. For example, I fought the closing of Jamaica High School. I went into the school and I saw that they had 3 specialized high schools in the building. The 3 specialized high schools each had a principal. Each student had a computer. Each classroom had a smart board. The class size was 15. Jamaica High School, which the mayor and the chancellor wanted to close, no computers, no smart boards, a class size of 35. And then they turn around and say, well, it has to close, it's failing. Well, you took away all the resources. I want to have somebody that knows how to get the resources. Melinda KATZ.
My father actually started the Queen's Symphony Orchestra in the basement of Jamaica High School. It really is an icon in the borough, and it's a shame. And we should have done more to keep that open. And I do believe that the mayor does have this habit, right? If he doesn't want to see a school succeed, he doesn't give the funding it needs in order to succeed, and then uses that excuse for co-location. I don't know parents today who believe that they have a real say in how the education of their children succeeds. And, you know, like the representative of the PEP from Queens does the best that anyone possibly could. But at the end of the day, parents don't feel like they have a real say on how their kids are educated. And part of the reason is the appointments to the PEP. The PEP is controlled 100% pretty much by the mayor. The vote is a majority of the mayor. Each borough president gets 1 appointment. Although the members of the board from the borough presidents can be vocal and they can debate and they can question, they can't decide. The mayor decides that. So my appointment needs to understand that they have to be a strong fighter. I believe that when we do mayoral control renewal up at the legislature, that renewal should include giving the borough presidents equal say on the PEP. It's real leverage. It's actually a real effective way to get it done. And until that happens, parents are never going to have a real say on how education continues in the borough.
Okay. Yeah. Earlier tonight, Tony Avella wanted to bring up, you all have served in the city council, the term limits vote. I wanted to give you a chance to respond to that.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I did not run for a 3rd term. I didn't want to run for a 3rd term. I ran for another office. I never was going to run for a 3rd term. But I do think that elected officials have to have core beliefs. I ran my entire career on the idea that I didn't think 8 years was long enough in the council. So I had to make a choice. Do I make a difficult political vote, or do I make a vote that simply will be easier for my political future, but doesn't go to the core beliefs that I have? So I did not take advantage of the vote I don't think 8 years is long enough, by the way. We have capital funding for parks, capital funding for the Department of Education. We have projects that we start as council members and as the borough president that I would like to see come to fruition. If I give money for member item money to a school and I build an auditorium, I would like at least a few years to make those projects happen. Every parent will tell you they get money allocated for their schools and it's never spent. And part of the problem is that there's such a turnover so quick that there is an incapability sometimes of seeing the projects through. I believe being an elected official is about your core beliefs. My history is 20 years as an elected official, and I'm on the record for many, many things. People have given up their seat because they voted for gay marriage or they voted for abortion or pro-choice because they had those core beliefs. So I think it's an important thing in office.
Peter Valllone.
Well, I've spent my entire career ignoring the people, but this vote, this term limits vote, was a very difficult vote. And at the end of the day, I wasn't the one who went around the people. That was the speaker. I had to vote on whether 12 years was better than 8 years. And Melinda's right. 8 years is far too short to get these capital projects through. In my last term alone, I was able to complete the George Doris Towers of 200 units of senior housing. I was able to complete a skate park in Story Park. I'm starting an amphitheater in Story Park, which won't finish. And people don't do future planning if they can't finish the projects. I passed a bill. It took me 5 years to get shepherd through the city council that's going to phase out those ugly roll-down gates that are a blight on our whole city covered with graffiti. That took 5 or 6 years to shepherd through the city council. And most importantly, I worked with Ray Kelly, who would not have been there, to continue to bring crime down. So it was a very difficult vote. I completely understand both sides of that argument, but good government groups agree 12 years is better than 8.
Well, the bottom line is the people voted twice in 2 public referendums for term limits. If you really felt that 12 years was appropriate, you should have gone back to the people and asked them to decide and not overturn it legislatively.
Okay, I've got a question for all of you about the process of rebuilding in the wake of Hurricane Sandy. Governor Cuomo and some others have suggested that some homeowners probably should not be rebuilding in some of the low-lying areas of the city because their homes are in areas that could easily flood again. Should all homeowners be allowed to rebuild? And what do you think is the key to helping Queens be better prepared for the next storm?
Well, for the first thing, we need a plan. I don't think we have a plan, and I think OEM has failed miserably. I think we all can agree that Queens did not get the resources after Hurricane Sandy, and Rockaway is still suffering. We need to have a sit-down with the communities, and it goes back to my community-based planning, to come up with a plan and how do we work forward for the next storm. Because all these storms that are supposed to happen 1 in 100 years are now happening once in every 5 years. So we need to do some real planning for mass transit. How do we get people off the, in case of the Rockaways, the peninsula? How do we prepare for the next storm? Do we need to build barriers? Do we need to protect the beaches? Or do we allow people to rebuild? I personally believe if somebody wants to rebuild, we should do everything possible. But I also happen to think that the Governor Cuomo has the right idea. If somebody doesn't want to rebuild in an area that's going to flood the next time, that we should, if they want to sell out to the state or the city, I think that's a viable option.
And Peter Valllone, tell us some of your thoughts.
Sandy has to be job one from day one for any of us. That's the next, any one of us that becomes the next borough president. You said preparation, and I agree with Tony, preparation is a big part of this. And I actually had 2 hearings as public safety chair prior to Sandy, one in 05 and one in 09, both entitled, Are We Ready for a Hurricane? And people made fun of me. But because of those hearings, we had a semblance of the plan in place. Clearly not enough, and I said so at the time. I've had hearings after. We just passed 9 pieces of legislation last week, which will ensure that we have plans for our most vulnerable, for protection, for gasoline to get delivered and pumped during the next storm. But right now, there's nothing being done in the Rockaways. These poor people have been asked to rebuild their homes and their businesses, but there's no protection. They've got $4 million lifeguard shacks, but they don't have any protection. The other areas that have been hit, they've been protected. There's been some very small areas of the boardwalk that have been rebuilt, but it is outrageous that the people of Queens have been left unprotected. To your question, should they rebuild everywhere? There may be some places that possibly we shouldn't be rebuilt, but for the most part, these people are strong. They just need the government's help. They're going to rebuild, and we're going to be back stronger than ever.
Melinda KATZ.
I'm raising my children in the house that I was brought up in. We've been there since 1953, and my children are being brought up in my old bedroom. I can't imagine someone saying to me, anybody saying to me, you have to move. I'm not allowing you to rebuild my home that I've made a life in the community that I've made a life in. Rockaways, Howard Beach, Jamaica, they're all getting flooded. And you know what? The Army Corps of Engineers keeps telling them that they are going to be protected, and yet FEMA keeps raising their insurance. It doesn't make sense. So should they be allowed to rebuild? Yes, they should be allowed to rebuild. We need to walk that through the process. We need to make sure that FEMA is fair in the way that they're allocating the funds. We need to make sure that we're prepared the next time that we have a once-in-a-lifetime storm, which we've had, by the way, 3 times, I think, in the last 10 years. But we do need an evacuation plan. We need transportation out in the Rockaways. We need service in and out of the Rockaways. We need to make sure that they can build in a quick manner, get reimbursed, and stop telling them that their insurance rates are going to rise, yet the federal government's going to come in and protect them. And although I think it's terrific that we have the beach community for folks in the borough of Queens, a lot of the houses are unprotected where there's no public beach. We need to get on that. It's protecting the Rockaways, and by the way, it's also protecting a large part of this borough if it's done properly.
Okay, that is going to be the last word. I would like to thank Melinda KATZ, Peter VALLONE Jr., and Tony AVELLA for joining us for tonight's debate. And don't forget, folks, primary day is Tuesday, September 10th. For more information about where you can vote, go to the city's Board of Elections website, vote.nyc.ny.us. We're going to take a short break now. I'll be back in a minute with the results of tonight's snap poll and a preview of tomorrow night's program. Stay with us.